Hey folks, this is Kalani. Patch 9.1 is chugging along quite nicely on the PTR with lots of new updates every week. This week we saw some big class buffs, powerful new crafted gear, and the new Mythic plus seasonal affix has been hinted at. A new world boss will present us with some new gearing opportunities, we know how long it could take to upgrade our legendaries, and we even have some quality of life changes to look forward to. Let's jump right in. First things first, because everybody wants to know if they've been buffed or not, let's take a look at the class changes that came through this week. Death Knights are up first, and this one is nice and easy. Blood Death Knights are getting a 6% increase to all of their spells and abilities across the board. That should help them deal a bit more damage to keep up with some of the other tank specs. It might not be the most exciting change in the world, but 6% will definitely be noticeable. The Hunters are up next, and it's a spec that you might have forgotten about at this point. Survival Hunter will see a 15% damage increase to their two main abilities, Raptor Strike and Kill Command. There's also a 15% boost to the Mongoose Bite and Flanking Strike talents, just to make sure the damage boost can be felt no matter what talent options you decide to roll with. I haven't seen too much about Survival Hunters so far in Shadowlands, which isn't really all too surprising when marksmanship has been hogging all of the spotlight, but these buffs might be enough to get a few of the old survival hunters to swap over to melee once again. Priests are finding themselves on the changes list quite often, once again this week, and it's a bit of give and take, I'm afraid. The Clear Mind Conduit's effectiveness has been reduced by 25%. If you weren't sure which conduit this is, it's the one that reduces the mana cost of Dispel Magic, Purify, and Mass Dispel, so the mana cost won't be reduced by as much in patch 9.1. Then we also have quite a few shadow changes. Shadow Word Pain damage has been increased by 25%, and Vampiric Touch damage has been increased by 25% as well. That's all for the positives for right now, I'm afraid, but there's also an 18% damage reduction to Devouring Plagues damage, a 16% damage reduction for the Shadow Flame Prism legendary, and an 8% nerf to the Talbadal's Stratagem legendary. From what I understand, those two legendaries were the top dogs in a Shadow Priest legendary set, so seeing them both get nerfed is definitely going to be disappointing. These changes seem to shift a Shadow Priest's damage out of insanity spending abilities, mainly Devouring Plague, and more into passive damage output via the two main dots. I wonder how the numbers are going to work out, but it definitely looks like a big overall nerf from where I'm sitting. Affliction Warlocks are back on the list, which is a little surprising because the last time they were here, they kinda got nuked from orbit. They might just have a chance to keep their spot as a top Warlock spec though. Corruption damage was increased by 15%, Seed of Corruption damage was increased by 25%, Dark Caller is no longer a talent, it's been made baseline. That reduces the Dark Glare cooldown to 2 minutes as standard, but as a trade-off, Shadow Embrace is no longer a passive. That has been moved into the talent tree. So it's a bit of a switcheroo here, but that might end up being a net gain with the 9.1 changes to Shadow Embrace anyway. On top of all of that, there is a new Conduit which increases the damage of Shadow Bolt or Drained Soul by 33% per damage over time effect you have on your target, and the Cold Embrace Conduit has been removed. This is a crazy list of changes, and it actually increases an Affliction Warlock's damage output outside of their typical shard burning phases. So even though Malefic Rapture was hit quite badly in a previous build, these changes could help fill in the damage gap with more reliable damage via filler spells and damage over time spells. Less reliance on burst windows with a shorter major cooldown could mean Affliction Warlock will do incredibly well for themselves in patch 9.1. We'll have to wait and see how everything pans out. The other specs might receive some more buffs later on in the PTR cycle, and of course many more changes could be waiting for Affliction. But right now, with these changes in place, Affliction looks to be very strong despite all of the previous nerfs. And the last class that saw some buffs in this build are the Warriors. For arms, Mortal Strike damage was increased by 10% in non-PvP situations, Deep Wounds damage was increased by 10% in non-PvP situations, Overpower damage was increased by 10%, and Execute damage was increased by 10% as well, but that buff does not apply to the Condemn Covenant ability. Some sizable increases in damage output there, but only if you're a PvEer, it would seem. The PvP arms warriors are bursty enough, I guess, so most of these buffs don't apply to PvP situations. As a quick last note, protection warriors will also get the execute damage buff, and it also won't apply to condemn. No love for the fury warriors this time around, I'm afraid, but from what I understand, Arms has been struggling a bit in PvE. I'm glad that the dev team is ready and willing to balance a spec differently in PvE and PvP, because there have been plenty of times in the past where certain specs have been left to underperform in raids and dungeons just because they're doing very well in PvP. The two types of content are very different, so balancing them individually does sometimes make sense. That's all for the class buffs and nerfs this week, but we have quite a while to wait before patch 9.1 goes live, so even if your class hasn't seen any changes just yet, there is still plenty of time for it to happen. Another interesting addition to the PTR this week is the new built-in Mythic Plus rating. When you create your own group for a dungeon, you will now automatically see any player's Mythic Plus score when they sign up. There's a brand new column for you to look at right beside the player's item level, so another number to take into consideration when deciding who to invite to your group. Similarly, you will be able to see the Mythic Plus score of the leader of a group when you sign up for a dungeon group. I don't think there's any way to see any other group members and their Mythic Plus score, which isn't too surprising, but you'll know exactly how much experience the leader of a group has when you're looking for a dungeon group to join. To check your own score, you can just open your Mythic Plus Keystone tab, the same window that shows your seasonal best dungeon runs, and your score will appear in the middle. From these pictures on Wowhead, you can see that each dungeon is broken down for you, so you can see how much score each of your runs is contributing to your total. There's also a line that says Fortified Best and Tyrannical Best, which points towards those affixes being scored differently. From the recent interview with game director Ian Hazzikostas, we know the plan for this system is to distinguish between fortified and tyrannical runs, and to reward a higher score to players who complete dungeons with both types of affixes. It also looks like completing a plus 16 will maybe reward you with about 300 score here, so we're going to be looking at some high numbers for anyone who has managed to complete all 8 dungeons on plus 15 or above, and on both tyrannical and fortified weeks. This system is still very much a work in progress though, so lots of things could change by the time this goes live. I'm still kind of surprised that Blizzard decided to add their own built-in scoring method for Mythic Plus dungeons. I know Raider.io has been the go-to for checking a player's Mythic Plus dungeon experience, and the vast majority of players who run a lot of dungeons use the add-on to vet their groups, but there were a lot of players who really didn't like the idea of being scored by an add-on. Now they simply don't have a choice, and this kind of scoring system is being forced upon them. Now personally, I don't really mind this system being in the game because it means I can uninstall Raider.io and I won't have to update it every day. It's definitely a quality of life upgrade for anyone who heavily relied on the add-on, but I also understand why some players are unhappy that it's being forced upon them. Obviously the system isn't finished yet, but what do you think of a Mythic Plus score being in-game now? Is this something you've been hoping for? Is it something you can adjust to and deal with? Or do you think it should have stayed as an external system? Let me know in the comments below. While we're on the topic of Mythic Plus dungeons, the first hints of a new seasonal affix have been found on the PTR. When patch 9.1 hits live servers, we will be leaving the prideful affix behind, and a new seasonal affix will take its place. We're still not too sure what the name is going to be, so this is very much a work in progress, but this is the first time we've seen the affix referenced in the game files. The description says, "Defeat the jailer's forces to gain cool powers." That's not too much to go off, but I can think of a few ways this affix could be implemented. The first thing I immediately gravitate towards is allowing us to use anima powers inside of dungeons. Imagine if a big Moorsworn monster spawns somewhere randomly in the dungeon, or maybe they spawn in every 20% of trash you clear, just like a prideful mob, and when you kill that mob it drops an anima orb with a few choices, just like in Torghast. They could place these monsters in specific locations to change up some dungeon routes, so you can choose between picking up the anima powers or trying to go through a faster route. There's definitely some potential here, and having access to a few anima powers could really change things up when it comes to Mythic Plus dungeons. Now, being allowed to use anima powers inside of a dungeon might seem a bit over the top until you look at the Sanctum of Domination raid. The very first boss in the new raid is the Taragru, and in the trash before the boss encounter, you are able to pick up 4 anima orbs. These anima orbs give you a choice of 3 anima powers, so you get to pick 4 powers to take into the boss fight and help you out. That's for your entire raid, by the way. Everybody gets to pick their own 4 powers. These aren't little wimpy anima powers either. You have some which make you immune to stuns, or take almost no AoE damage, or increase your primary stat by a stupid amount, or just straight up increase your damage. It's kind of insane, and the boss fight is going to be a complete wild card because of it. If we're allowed to use anima powers in the raid, at least for one of the bosses, why not in Mythic Plus dungeons as well? That could really shake things up. The other possibility, which is probably way more likely sadly, is that the affix will add special monsters which are considered forces of the jailer throughout the dungeon, and killing different types of monsters will provide you with specific benefits to your group. Hopefully they add in some fun stuff and it's not just small increases to primary stat or overall damage, but we'll have to wait until the affix becomes testable on the PTR to see how it's really going to work. Either way, I am very excited to see what the dev team can come up with and whether or not they'll let us go crazy in Mythic Plus in patch 9.1, because there is a lot of potential for a lot of fun with this new affix. Moving on, you may remember that in last week's video we touched on some new profession items, specifically some new crafter's marks that promise to increase the overall item level of crafted gear. Well, those items have received some updates and they're going to be much more powerful than we first anticipated. First up, the Crafter's Mark III previously increased item levels to 180. Not altogether too amazing in the grand scheme of things with patch 9.1's item level increases across the board, but in this week's PTR build they were buffed up to increase a piece of crafted gear up to item level 200. That's much more in line with what I would expect for some catch-up gear in the new patch. This also means that crafted gear in patch 9.1 will allow you to catch up to the gear level of Castle Nathria on normal mode, so if you were hoping to gear up some of your alts before patch 9.1 rolls around, it might actually just be worth waiting for the new crafted gear. It's certainly going to be easier than trying to gear up from the raid. It looks like the source for this recipe hasn't changed yet, it's still acquired from the new Corthier reputation at the Honoured level, which hopefully won't take too long. That's not all though. The prestigious crafter's mark that increased item levels to 200 but forced a unique equipped factor onto a piece of crafted gear has also changed. They're now called crafter's mark of the Chained Isle, and they will increase a piece of crafted gear's item level up to 230. That is a huge step up in power, but the unique equipped effect remains in play. This means that just from crafted gear alone you can equip almost a full set of item level 200 gear with one piece of item level 230 gear in patch 9.1. That single piece of 230 crafted gear is also higher than Castle Nathria mythic gear and higher than normal Sanctum of Domination gear, so I imagine it's going to be very useful for a lot of players, especially considering you get to choose your perfect stats as well. We're not too sure where this recipe comes from though, so keep your eyes peeled for a source later on down the line. Another source of higher item level gear that will be available to everyone in patch 9.1 is the new world boss. Morgeth, Tormentor of the Damned, will be our next loot pinata over in Corthier. From the list of abilities, it sounds like killing him might be a bit more involved when compared to some of the other world bosses we've seen so far, but I'm sure our superior numbers and a good old dollop of brute force will get the job done. Who does mechanics for world bosses anyway? The world boss doesn't have any loot to look at just yet, but if the same patterns hold true from the previous world bosses, I would expect the loot to be 7 item levels above the Sanctum of Domination's normal item level rewards. With the normal mode of the next raid tier dropping item level 226 gear, that would put the expected world boss gear at 233, definitely something the vast majority of players will be interested in. Now we just need to hope that the world boss has a few pieces that we actually want, and we need to be lucky enough to get them to drop, which is the real trick, as many of you probably know. It's all about item levels this week, I guess, because we also have some more solid information on how long it will take us to upgrade our legendary gear to the new ranks available in patch 9.1. Right now we're capped out at rank 4, which is item level 235, but in patch 9.1 we'll be able to upgrade them to rank 5, which is item level 250, and then up to rank 6, which is item level 260. That will be our maximum legendary item level in patch 9.1 if these values don't change. You may have heard that upgrading your legendaries in 9.1 will not cost any more soul ash, and while that is technically correct, you will have to farm for a different currency instead, soul cinders. To upgrade a legendary to rank 5 you will need 500 soul cinders, and to upgrade to rank 6 you'll need a total of 1650 soul cinders. Now that value is a total, so if you upgrade from a rank 5 to a rank 6, that means you only need an extra 1150 soul cinders to make up the difference. Soul cinders start to drop in Torghast when you get to layer 9, and they are rewarded from completing any layer above that, up to the new max of layer 12. Completing layer 9 will reward you with 60 soul cinders, layer 10 will reward you with 50 soul cinders, layer 11 rewards an additional 40 soul cinders, and then layer 12 will reward you with 30 soul cinders. These rewards work just like the old soul ash rewards in that if you run a layer 12 and you haven't completed any other layers for that week, you will be rewarded for every layer below layer 12 as well as the layer 12 rewards. That means when you've unlocked layer 12, you only need to complete layer 12 once per week per wing of Torghast available to earn all of the rewards on offer. If you're curious, the total amount of soul cinders you can earn from a Torghast wing is 180 per week, for a total of 360 soul cinders per week if you clear both available wings. Torghast isn't the only source of this new currency though. The new weekly event in the Maw, the Tormentors of Torghast, also rewards you with 50 soul cinders for completion. There are also new Covenant Assaults in the Maw. These rotate exactly like the 8.3 N'Zoth Assaults, so we'll have 2 per week and they each reward you with 50 soul cinders if you complete them. That gives us an extra 150 soul cinders per week for a total of 510 soul cinders per week if you do absolutely everything available. Using these numbers, that means it will take you 1 week to be able to afford an upgrade to rank 5. It's extremely close though. You can earn 510 soul cinders and the upgrade will cost 500. So if you miss out on any source, you won't be able to afford the upgrade. Then it will take another 3 weeks after that to earn enough to cover the 1150 soul cinder cost to upgrade to rank 6 for 4 weeks total before you will see your first rank 6 legendary. Remember that all of these numbers could change before the patch goes live, but the timeline sounds about right to me. There's no way the dev team would let us get a rank 6 legendary too fast, but getting a quick rank 5 would encourage players to check out the new content to earn the new soul cinders currency. It's also nice that some of the currency comes from outside of Torghast. That means you can work towards a legendary upgrade while completely ignoring Torghast if you really want to. It's going to take you quite a bit longer obviously, but at least you'll have some choices regarding your soul cinders farming in patch 9.1. This PTR build also introduced a few quality of life upgrades, including a new story skip. If you haven't completed all of the Torghast storylines from Bolvar, including the Twisting Corridors quests to discover the fate of Anduin before patch 9.1, you will now be allowed to skip straight to the new stuff, so you don't need to worry about finishing these specific storylines on all of your characters just to get caught up and ready for 9.1, which is great news for anyone who plays a bunch of characters, or for anyone wanting to swap their main in patch 9.1. And last on this list of changes, there is also a minor change to how Conduit energy is going to work, though nothing quite as exciting as what most players would like to see. Now whenever you swap covenants, your Conduit energy will be completely filled up to ensure you can change things around as much as you need to or want to after making the big covenant swap. This probably won't affect too many players, but it is a nice quality of life change. Now if we can only do something more impactful, like getting rid of Conduit energy, that would be wonderful. But that should get you all caught up with the current progress of patch 9.1 and all of the interesting updates that came through this week. What do you think of another currency grind from Torghast related to upgrading legendary gear? How do you feel about a new Mythic plus affix that could let you use anima powers in dungeons? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to everyone who has subscribed on Twitch. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.